Hello, I just passed the Oregon tax consultant state only exam. You can take the state only exam if you're an EA. And I wanted to kind of just answer some of the questions that I had prior to taking the test. I didn't get a perfect score, so I'm not like a super expert in Oregon tax now, but I passed the test, so that means something, I guess. So I'm going to kind of answer some of those questions that I wanted answered on my end, and I will go through those questions insofar as I can. Now, I don't think I'm permitted to talk about the specific questions on the test, especially since I just took it. Not the fact that I can remember every single line by line. I don't have photographic memory, but I will say that of the questions that I got, I will kind of give you an idea of what you need to study in order to pass those type of questions. Okay. So Oregon actually gives you the information you need to study. And one of the concerns that I had was that the information they tell you to study won't encompass everything that will actually might end up showing on the test. Usually, like a lot of the times in like maybe school, college, sometimes they will ask you questions that are not actually in the study material. So they'll tell you to study this or that thing. Then they'll ask you a question that you might be able to surmise based off of the study material, but it is not actually specifically in the study material. But for me, I feel like everything they tell you to study is pretty much what's covered on the test, at least the test that I took. I don't think they give you the same 50 questions that everyone has to take. So with the 50 questions on the state only exam, um, let me actually pull up on my end everything you need to study. Just a second here. Okay, so this could change over time. So you want to, if you're watching this video a year from now or something like that, this might not be exactly the same, but just based off this current period, this is kind of what they tell you to study. Now, this gives you a bunch of information. You can kind of look through it. Enrolled agent state only exam. This is the test that I took. There's other exams that you might have to take, but I'm just talking about the state only exam. So if you scroll down, where is it at? I probably should have did this before unpausing, but anyway, if you scroll down to Oregon right here, this is the study material that I studied, right? I just read this stuff and that's how I passed. I didn't even like when I read, I try to kind of like actively learn. That's a learning technique where you read something and then you try to think about what you just read, pull it from your memory, kind of like test yourself on what you just read, and you do that. But since I was kind of procrastinating on this and I gave myself only 7 days or approximately 7 days, 7 to 8 days to actually pass the test, I wasn't really, I was really procrastinating a lot of the time. So I didn't have a full time to read everything, but I did read all of this here. And then after reading all of this, I read there's about 929 pages in this Oregon Publication 17, which is kind of like the Oregon equivalent of the IRS Federal Pub 17. I read 90 pages of that. And when I was about to go into the exam, I was like, I didn't finish reading everything and I need to study more, right? So I actually looked through all of that and pretty much everything that was in that last, what is that, 130, I'm sorry, the last 30 pages uh, was possibly on the test. So pretty much after examining everything, all of this stuff that the material you will see in this will be sufficient to pass the test. Now, I don't know. I'm not from Oregon, so I don't really know, but there probably are courses and classes that you can take in Oregon as an enrolled agent in order to try to pass this test. But I wouldn't know if you would need to actually spend all of that money. I mean, if that is required. I mean, you can just study these things and then you should be able to pass because based off my experience, that is all of the information that there. Now, here's the thing. As far as a specific order to what to study things in, me personally, you can do it any way you want to. First thing I read is the Oregon Schedule A, since there was just pretty fast, like 5 pages. Just read that just to get that out the way. Actually read that twice. I read it once during the tax season, and then I was like, I probably should wait until after the tax season to actually have the time to actually sit here and actually focus on studying this material. I still did a very bad time job at actually studying the material after the tax season. But during the tax season, I'm working like 90 hours a week, sometimes some weeks, and then other weeks like 60 hours a week. And then on, so it's like I need to really just focus on tax season during the tax season. So after the tax season, I started reading this, and then the exact order doesn't really matter. But I will say this, especially if you're tight on time, I would focus, you can get these out the way because there's a good percentage of the questions that are based off these things. Some of these questions related to the administrative rules and Oregon's revised statute, they're basically just like administrative. As a tax preparer, these are the things that you need to know about being licensed in Oregon. And I would say that it is um, some of these things are somewhat intuitive, but I would say you give it a good read once, and if you have a fairly average memory like myself, you should be able to that should be stuck in your brain if you don't take the test too long thereafter. But I read that, and then I would say read these two next, because especially if you're tight on time, because everything here is these two right here are an overview of what you'll end up getting in Pub 17. That's at least my general idea. So if you read basically all four of these, you're getting a pretty good overview of what's going to be in Oregon 17. And I think that if I would have done it the opposite way, I might have not gotten through everything that I should have gotten through. If I would have tried to read Oregon 17 first and then read these, I think the probability of me failing would have been higher. But of course, you don't have to worry about that if you're not like me and you're going to just waste a bunch of time doing none related to things that are productive. Then you don't have to worry about that. Just study everything and then make sure you get that in there. Now, everyone studies differently. Some people use study guides and all of that. Me personally, a lot of times when I'm studying for these type of tests, I'll just read it, read it a second time if I need to. Try to really pull from memory the information that I'm getting there. Just practice that, and then eventually it gets stuck in there. So that's pretty much everything you need. As far as what percentage of each thing is in there, I think they actually do talk about it in here. How to file, Oregon license law 6%. Uh, let's see here. Yeah, I mean, this is what they're saying here. I mean, based off the percentages I have on this actual document, um, it might be different than that, but I will say that you can kind of go based off this. I don't think this is an exact amount though, based off what I'm looking at here, but I could be wrong. Okay. So either way though, this is kind of what you should expect as far as what percentage of questions will relate to what. That looks like more or less what I'm dealing with over here on my actual document that they give here. But that was kind of the main things that I wanted to know. Like, what do I need to actually study? If you just study the stuff that I just showed you over here, you should be able to actually pass the test. Just these things here. All that's it. Just know these things and you'll pass. Now, another thing is that I got the results immediately after the test. So that's another question that someone might have. I think that you could probably find that somewhere in these documents, but I got that information right after the test, and that was nice. That definitely speeds up the process. I thought for sure I was going to fail, but I didn't. So another thing you want to consider is make sure you're actually studying the correct year. So for me, I actually started studying 2024, but I ended up, studying 2023 after calling them. I called them and I was like, what year I'm supposed to be studying right now? For some of you, that might be obvious. You might be able to not make that mistake, but I made that mistake. I started studying 2024 stuff because we were working on 2024 tax returns, not realizing that you actually need to be studying 2023 stuff. So make sure you're studying the right material from the right year. As far as, let me pull this back up here. As far as these two here, I don't really think you have to focus on the year. I don't think those change for the year. So I don't think you have to really worry about that. But for the rest of these, Oregon 17, Oregon tax 4-year resident, you want to make sure you're studying the correct year for that, right? For these ones that I have highlighted there. Another thing to consider is this. Let let me pause this for the nature of the questions. So I don't know how much detail I can give, but I will say there was a lot more true false questions than I thought that there were going to be. Generally speaking, I thought that there would just be like four, maybe more options, but for the most part, it was either true or false questions or four potential options type questions. There might have been more than four options. I don't remember that being the case. I can't exactly remember, but I will say most of them are four true or false questions. True or false questions are great because you have a 50% chance being right if you don't know the answers, but try to know the answers by the time you get there, obviously. I will say this though. That did shock me, but even the true or false questions and the four potential options, multiple choice questions, none of them were like gotcha questions. None of them were like super out the way. Like everything seemed like if you study the material, you will know the answer to this. Now, obviously, whenever it comes down to tax related questions, if you're an EA, for example, or if you are like in Maryland, I have a Maryland license before I became an EA. And with the Maryland test, it's kind of the similar thing. Every tax question type exam, they'll always ask you not questions to it will kind of like a trip you up a little bit, but it's not really a trick question. It's just like a question where like we want you to actually be reading what we're saying and not kind of just like skimming through. So, for example, if you say, well, which one of these are not a deduction? I'm just kind of thinking of a general tax question. Which one of these are not a deduction you could take in your tax return? And then they would list a bunch of things that you can take as a deduction. Now, if you are not properly reading that question, you're going to think, oh, well, we can actually take this as a deduction. That's fine. All right. So make sure you're actually reading the question and actually choosing the one that's not the proper deduction, not the one that is a proper deduction. You just didn't read it through. Now, I did make this mistake once throughout the test that that I realized and then corrected. There was a question, true or false question. I answered true, even though I knew the answer to be false. I answered true, and kind of just because I was clicking through it real fast. And then I sat there. I went to the next question. I was like, wait a second, that question asked this or that. I need to go back and actually answer false. So that's another thing. It will allow you to go back and answer questions that once you realize, like, wait a second, I made a mistake. But that was a question where I knew for sure the answer is just I got in a rhythm a little bit. I was getting through a rhythm, just answering questions pretty quickly. And then I saw that question. I knew the answer, kind of just clicked real fast. I was like, wait a second, I accidentally clicked true, and that's a false answer. So I went back and answered that. So you want to be careful about that. You want to actually take your time with that. I think that's about all that I need to say about this. And if you have any more questions, maybe you can ask them below. If Oregon is watching this and I did something that I wasn't supposed to, just please let me know and I can take the video down. Anyway, goodbye.